Hey, everybody. My name's Erik. I'm a therapist, and I really feel strongly to do a series on getting through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, that would help people with every kind of addiction, any kind of problem, and even codependency. Those who have family members that are struggling with addiction, that are really dealing with difficult things. So it'd be like if you invited me to your house or you came to my house. We get to sit in a nice, comfy couch, have tea, coffee, and just walk through these steps together. That would be my heart. I think that's the way it actually should be done. But here I find myself many miles from loved ones. And what do I do? I think I'm just going to do the best I can do with taking this book, letting you have a PDF of it, taking the steps little by little, but not slow, but not fast, but just at a good tempo. And I'll talk about the tempo that these things could be done. Would it be really good idea to have someone in the room with you while watching this and reading this together? Absolutely. There's something that works about going through the steps with another human being. So we're really actually, especially step 4 and 10, this is meant to be done in community. We got sick in a disease state in relationship with families. This isn't blaming, it's just is. We got sick in community and relationship, so we can only really heal in relationship. And we heal best by, first of all, our relationship with God. And there may be those that going, oh, is this religious? Well, let's just say this is trying to help you connect with God, which will solve your problems. So we shall look at that here. The book of Alcoholics Anonymous, this little book is now in PDF form. It's actually a public domain. I love it. It's public domain. So we're going to go through this together. And I'm just going to say, God, help us to have insight on how to do these steps, to take these steps. And I'm going to change the language as we go a bit. You're going to see that there is flexibility to make this fit all our addictions. And if I leave out one addiction on one thing, it doesn't mean that I don't mean it for everything. We of Alcoholics Anonymous, or whatever anonymous you're part of, or maybe you're not even part of any anonymous, are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics or addicts or co-addicts or codependents precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So they just tell you right off, what is this book about? Its main purpose is to help us recover. And notice the word recovered. I hear a lot of people talk about I'm a recovering and recovery and all that. It's because they usually are still slipping, or out of humility, they say that they're continuing to recover from something. But my goal is for us today is to recover. And I love the phrase seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. It just seems like there is no hope, but there is hope here. These are the page numbers, which are actually in Roman numerals. So when you see that, I'm going to go through it. I'll translate it for what it is. The physician. So what is this about? Well, this physician is a Dr. Silkworth. They asked him to write a letter for the original book. The original book, he was so wanting to keep anonymity, he wrote it anonymously. And now, since it was so effective in treating alcoholism, he puts his name to it. And all that you'll see in this PDF, which I can get to you, that's in ugly colors, are the problem. And those that are in pretty colors are the solution. So whatever the gist, the most simple way to put addiction is that it's something we continue to do over and over and over. It can give us some pleasure and temporary relief to our problems, even fixing others, trying to be codependent, giving people advice, controlling them, gives us temporary relief. But it doesn't turn out well. Our minds don't do well with this, our spirits, our bodies. Even codependency harms our body in that we are tired, we're not getting sleep. We're afflicted with stress hormones. People that struggle with compulsive eating, their bodies are sickened as well as their minds and hearts. And the obsession is part of this. So there's this obsession to use, just like the co-addict, the person who struggles with co-addiction and is afflicted by thoughts of worry and fears and what am I going to do? And they did this again. And that's an obsession of the mind, very similar to the alcoholic who gets it in his mind or her mind that they want to drink and they just don't seem to be able to get rid of that until finally they just, give up. And we'll talk about that there. Let's go through here. This is a lovely phrase in XXVI, which is 26. The allergic type can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. So alcoholics, most of them will say, I can never drink again. And with addictions like food, sex, spending, work, codependency, we tend to go, well, how do I just abstain? Is the recovered codependent just offering no help whatsoever? I just will stay away from them. Or the person with sex addiction, like I'll never have sex again, that is an option. It doesn't sound fun to them. But how do I find healthy, moderate sexuality expressed? Food. We have to find a way to moderately use food. With spending, most of us are going to have to find a way to spend moderately or to save or to look at things. Things like drugs, alcohol, gambling, we can actually just never do that again. So there's a place where we have to work it out. What is our goal here? And it says, and once having found the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Yep, that's addiction. We start to connect the dots and realize our problems of emotional problems, relational problems, financial problems, legal problems, problems with kids, work, it just goes on, health problems. We're at a place where it becomes astonishingly difficult to solve. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. So this idea that, well, if I just have an emotional appeal to myself or someone's appealing to them, like what if I'm the person who's the codependent? I'm just going to use frothy emotional appeal. Please stop. You're killing yourself. Yeah, it doesn't work. I have to admit that it doesn't work. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. So this program is very simple and it has depth. One of the people I love, Mr. Rogers, Mr. Fred Rogers, the children's a host of a children's program, said that he was concerned that our society is moving away from deep and simple to shallow and complex. I believe that that's very true. Very, very true. That we are somehow just focused too much on things that do not matter, things that go off in all these different directions, and things that are complicated. And it's causing us stress and anxiety. And then we run to this addiction, which makes things simple. It just, oh, I'll just drink. I will just fix my problems by fixing others. Yeah, or I'll just go eat. I'll go spend. We have to have something, a message that's deep and simple and true to have this work. Okay. So it has to be grounded. It says in nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. And if those are struggling with the idea of God, you're welcome to continue to listen in and just see what this has to offer. Or it's understandable if you go, I'm not interested in, and that's okay. People, I think in this culture, is so afraid of mentioning God that it might offend someone and then they go run off with it. But I'm not going to be that person because God has done everything for me. And that's actually the purpose of the 12 steps. And we'll see that later. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. Okay. Men and women fix others, try to get people to do what they want because they like the effect produced by, fixing, trying to appeal to them, arguing, anything to try to get them to do what we want. Men and women lust, essentially because they like the effect produced by lust. Men and women overeat, snack, chips, watch TV, play video games, spend money, go to the casino because they like the effect produced by these things. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it's injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their addictive life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks, or those addictions, or ease and comfort which comes by trying to fix people. Drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they succumb to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink or use again. That is addiction, by the way. That's what happens. If you feel like you're going around and around and around the barn, then you know you might have an addiction. It says in the Bible that a fool repeats his folly. And I'm not here to call people fool. The point is that we're not alone. That we do the same thing over and over, and we think it's going to turn out different this time. And I see this all the time. People say, but I'll just stop drinking. Okay. Or I just won't do this anymore. Or I'll lose weight. I'll go on a diet. I did that many times, many, many times, thinking it's going to turn out different. I really thought it would be different. And that's just as much as part of the addictive cycle as the eating part. And thinking I'll just have a conversation with my loved one. I know I will just talk them into a state of reasonableness. And then the person goes, uh-huh, that's right. That sounds good. Yes, I won't drink anymore. I won't lust anymore. I won't go to the casino. Oh, good. Everything's good. It's good until it's not good. Yeah, we do this over and over and over again. And I smile because it's not laughable, but maybe it's a nervous smile on my part, but it is kind of strange. And I did this for many years. Thankfully, I don't need to live like that over and over again. Do I make the same mistakes over and over at a different level? I do. Yeah. So it says this is repeated over and over. And unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. Huh. So, entire psychic change. Now, the word psychic doesn't mean, psychics are us and ask them it for advice. This means kind of a psychological. Psyche in Greek means soul. It means soul, like psychology is soul healing. So we need something that's going to change, entire change, not just getting rid of lust or liquor or spending or gambling or whatever. It's the whole thing. And on the other hand, the strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control this desire for alcohol or the substance or the fixing of people. The only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. Are you kidding me? I love this. And that's why it goes from this ugly, the problem and the word suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire. Now, I don't necessarily always like the word control because to me, I'm admitting powerless over the substances and behaviors of my life. But there is that aspect that I don't want it anymore. And how do I do that? I do a few simple things, and we'll talk about that. The steps were originally from these Oxford groups, and there was only really 4. Imagine that there were no 12 steps, okay? Because that's how this started. This book introduced the idea of 12 steps. Were the original people doing 12 steps? They were not. Yeah, that may seem shocking. Well, then what happened? Well, Bill Wilson wrote this book, and people were doing 4 processes. The first one was a total surrender to God, total letting God run the person's life. And then the next thing they were doing, and I say next, but they were doing it all simultaneously, is confessing their faults, their sins. There's a Bible verse in the book of James that says, confess your faults or sins one to another that you may be healed. So confession is a really important part of this process. Making amends is another big deal. Like, I'm going to be blocking God's interaction with me if I'm holding a grudge towards people or if I've harmed people. And then guidance. Guidance is a word that describes how do I seek God and ask Him for direction in everything in my life. So that's what people were doing. If people are interested in this, I would look at the work of a guy named Dick B. In 12 Steps Land. People just use their last initials. So I'd be Erik B. But I'm not speaking as a 12-stepper as much as I'm speaking as a professional talking about 12 steps, because I don't want to be representing any one program here. But the steps were steps because they were things you did, not things you believe. So this is not getting more information. This is taking steps, and the understanding will come after you take the steps. So people say, men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal, Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me. Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that is in him, it is often not enough. Okay, so what's happening here? Well, this is the section written by a doctor. And so the doctor or counselor is faced with these situations where people are addicted, or situations that it's beyond what we can do. That counseling doesn't fix this. 12 steps does. So it says one feels that something more than human power is needed one feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. Yeah. I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism or addiction is entirely a problem of mental control. And I believe that. There are people that want to talk and say, I believe in rational recovery, or I don't need God to help me with my problems. And if that's the case, then it would be a case of mental control. If that were the case, then we are totally responsible for our addictions. Totally responsible. That there is no real force or entity forcing us to do these things. I chose to do this. I chose to use drugs again. I chose to have an affair. I chose to go to the casino and wipe out my spending, or my bank account. I chose to stay with this person even though they've had 10 DUIs and we are bankrupt. I chose to have the person be there who's an addict who screams and yells at my children. Yeah. And that's one choice. If a person wants to take full responsibility for everything, and then I would just say, don't choose that anymore. Just say no. There was a government slogan in America that said, just say no. Wow. If it was that simple, it doesn't appear to be that simple. It appears that they have a hard time saying no to spending and all kinds of things. Yeah. So I don't believe that it's just a matter of mental control. That being said, what does that mean? It means that I see addiction as a problem that's greater than ourselves, and I see it as a spiritual force. And it's amazing how many people we can have this conversation about a material world. Like, do you believe in just only a material world, that everything is really reduced to atoms and electrons circulating in our brain, and that all our thinking, all our ideas of love, and our sense of self is just biochemistry? Like, do we really believe that? And then let's look at our problems. Do we believe that there is really no forces at work beyond us trying to get us to overeat or spend or gamble or lust? What about all the evil in the world? Like, certainly, if we're all basically biological creatures where there is no spiritual force at work, we're not spirits, we're just biochemical composites interacting. And what we think is spiritual is just purely, I don't believe this, I'm just saying that, but we're just purely biochemistry interacting with each other. What we've been through in a couple of years doesn't look too good, and it doesn't even follow the patterns of evolution. Why did we take care of a bunch of vulnerable people? That doesn't fit if we're just biochemical people, and we should just let, the idea of survival of the fittest. Yeah. So I believe there's something in us that's obviously beyond this, that we are human beings created in the image and likeness of God. And we are like God in that regard, that that's for another topic, which will fit later in the book here when we do step 2. But our addiction are spiritual forces, and this really helps. It changes everything to realize when you're tempted to use again, tempted to fix again, you're tempted to have fears and anxiety and anger and resentments, and you can't let it go. And even if you logically know that resentment will be your downfall, you're still doing it. It helps a lot to see that these are spiritual forces and that we need a force greater than ourselves that will restore us to sanity. So we are going to, I think, we'll do this and then we will conclude with the next video here. There are classifications of alcoholics, and not all addicts need to be classified or codependents classified, but I think this is somewhat helpful. And we have to be mindful that this is 1940s English, okay, 1930s English, and I'll translate. So it says the classification of alcoholics or addicts seem most difficult, and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We are all familiar with this type. They're always going on the wagon for keeps. They are overly remorseful and making many resolutions, but never a decision. Okay. Most of that's self-explanatory. There is the type of man who is willing to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking or using. He changes his brand or his environment. Yeah. So there are people that just won't go to the casino as much. People that have compulsive overeating that will just use diet food or vegan food, but they're still obsessed with food. The sexaholic that thinks I just won't do the real bad stuff or the illegal stuff, but I'll do the normal stuff, whatever that is. Or using it without something that looks, just looking at people in inappropriate ways, okay? Or the codependent that goes, okay, I'll read a codependency book and I'll try really, 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 really hard not to try to say anything, but inwardly, they're still trying, just, it's still there. Number 3, there is the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol or their addiction for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. Yep, I run into this a lot. There is the manic depressive type who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written. Yeah. And that we call that just the emotional type. And we drink because we have these emotional problems or we're anxious. And people say, but I'm anxious before I had this. Yeah, but alcohol or marijuana is certainly not helping. And then 5, this is why I read this, because this is the one we all want to be. Then there are the types entirely normal in every respect except the effect the alcohol or the drug or the codependency has on them. They're often able, intelligent, friendly people. Yeah. I remember listening to a speaker that I loved it. He says, hi, my name's Gene. I'm a mild alcoholic. And all, people laugh. Why would we want to say it that way? Because all of us want to be mild. We want to be normal in every way. Yeah. It's just how we are. And we're obsessed with it. All these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking or using the drug without the development of phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may have the manifestation of an allergy. Basically, what that means is an abnormal reaction to something, which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been by any treatment with which we are familiar permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. So this is talking about alcoholism. So when they talk about abstinence, they're talking about just never drinking again. And I see good results from that. Same thing with heroin, same thing with opiates, marijuana. People go, well, I'll just use it occasionally. Yeah, good luck on that. I mean, if you can do it occasionally, then you're not an addict. Overeating, entire abstinence, it doesn't fit. Sexual addiction probably doesn't fit for most of us, although some people do choose a life of abstinence. Spending, that's almost impossible unless someone is handling all our spending for us. Codependency, we're going to have to interact with people and find moderate ways to love others and sacrifice in many ways for others, because that is what we're called to do. But find to do it in a way where I'm not selfish in the process. And we'll talk about that later. So you take care. I'll see you on the next video. Have a good one.